Om Namo Narayana. Welcome back to the Narada Parivarajaka Upanishad. As we are on the fifth section and the second half, and we're going to go right to the end today, starting from verse 25. Know the individual self to be awake. When it remains in the eye, when in the throat it enters the dreaming state, it is in the heart in deep sleep, but remaining in the head, it is the fourth state, Turiya. Knowing the Turiya to be the indestructible Brahman, he who remains as though unconscious of all happenings, such as whatever is heard or seen, remains as one in the state of deep sleep, though he is in the waking state. In him, even in the dreaming state, such condition of non-consciousness prevails. The Shastras say that he is one who is liberated while living. The exposition of the meaning of all scriptures that such a person alone attains liberation. A mendicant monk does not hanker after this world or the next. If he has such expectation, he becomes one in accordance with that. By ritual practices of the scripture, other than investigation into the self, he does a useless thing, like the burden borne by a camel of a load of saffron flowers. For him there is no practice of the science of yoga, no pursuit of the lore of the Sankhya, nor application of the mantras and rituals. If an ascetic practices lores other than self-realization, it is like adorning a corpse. As a cobbler is far away from the performance of Vedic rituals, so is he from the practice of Brahma Vidya by his rituals. He is not to devote himself to repeat the pranava. Whatever activity he does, he has to reap the fruit of. Thence, disregarding all ritual acts like the foam and castor oil, and seeing the unclad ascetic engaged in it, self-realization with complete control of the mind and using the hand as the alms bowl, the mendicant monk shall truly renounce all worldly attachments. Like a child, madman, or a goblin, the mendicant monk shall not desire either for death or life, but shall merely mark time according to the maxim of a servant awaiting orders. If an ascetic merely lives on the alms, devoid of the qualities of forbearance, wisdom, dispassion, tranquillity, etc., he is a bane on the conduct of ascetics. Not by bearing an emblematic staff, not by shaven head, not by special dress, not by hypocritical airs of sagehood, does liberation come to one. He who bears the staff of wisdom is said to be single-staffed. The ascetic who carries a wooden stick, eats all sorts of food, and is devoid of wisdom goes to terrible hells called Maharaurava. A stable position in a monastery is said by great sages to be similar to the excreta of a sow. Hence, leaving it aside, the ascetic shall move about like an assiduous worm. The Turiya Tita ascetic shall have food and clothing without solicitation, and just as they happen to occur by the will of others. He shall be unclad and have a bath at others' will. The ascetic whose behavior is well in harmony even with the dreaming state as with the waking state is considered the best. He is the most excellent among those that follow the Vedanta. In non-acquirement of alms he shall not grieve. In its acquisition he shall not feel joy. Avoiding attachment to material things, he shall simply keep himself alive for a higher purpose. He shall in all cases shrink from being honored by admiring disciples. The ascetic who welcomes such honor gets bound with worldly ties, though liberated. For the sake of bare subsistence, an ascetic may go about for alms to the houses of approved classes of people at the proper time when they have dined after the fire ritual. Using his hand as a vessel for receiving food, the ascetic shall not solicit alms more than once a day. He may eat the food standing, he may eat the food walking. There is no ceremonial sipping of water in between. The ascetics with pure thoughts keep within the limits of good behavior like the sea. These great men do not abandon the prescribed course of conduct like the sun. When the ascetic seeks food with his mouth alone like a cow, he shall then be equanimous in all beings. He is then fit for immortality. Going to a house which is not forbidden for alms, he shall avoid a house which is prohibited. He shall enter the house when the door is open. He shall never go towards the house when it is closed. He shall shelter for the night in a deserted house covered with dust. Or he may shelter under a tree, giving up all the likes and dislikes. The ascetic shall go to sleep where he is when the sun sets, and be free of ritual fire and fixed abode. He shall live on what comes at random, self-possessed, and senses subdued. departing from human habitations, and resorting to a forest, possessing true knowledge and senses subdued, moving about, awaiting the time of death, the ascetic becomes fit for absorption into Brahman. The sage who moves about, desisting from causing fear to all beings, has nothing to fear from any being. Free from pride and egotism, unaffected by the pairs of opposites, with all doubts dispelled, the ascetic never gets angry nor hates anyone, nor does he utter a false word, moving in holy places, causing no injury to living beings, and receiving alms at the proper time, the sage is fit for absorption in Brahman. He shall at no time associate himself with the forest dwellers and the householders. He shall desire to move about unobtrusively. Joy of any kind shall not enter him. His path indicated by the sun, he shall walk the earth unhurriedly like a worm. Actions entailing blessing, and those connected with injury as well as those intended for the welfare of the world, these ascetics shall perform neither, nor cause others to do so. He shall not be attached to heterodox doctrines, nor pursue a means of living. He shall not indulge in assertive arguments, nor lean to either side in a debate. He shall not have a following of disciples, nor study many books. He shall not utilize a commentary, nor initiate inaugural functions anywhere. Without displaying any distinctive emblem or motive, the ascetic shall show himself to the people as a madman, or a child, or a dumb person, though he is all-wise. He shall neither do nor speak on anything. He shall have no thoughts, good or bad. Delighting in the self, the sage shall move about, leading this way of life. He shall move about the country alone, free from attachment, his senses subdued, playing with and rejoicing in the self, self-possessed, equanimous. Wise but playful like a child, well versed but appearing dull-witted, the ascetic shall journey. Learned, he may speak like a madman. Seeking food like a cow, he shall walk in the path of the Upanishads. Disregarded, insulted, deceived, envied, beaten, obstructed, or made to suffer by denial of food by wicked people, or when feces and urine are thrown at him by the ignorant and shaken in various ways, the ascetic, desiring welfare but fallen into difficulties, shall raise himself by the power of the self. Honor received by the ascetic brings about great loss to the wealth of his penance, but when he is disregarded by ignorant people, he attains success in the practice of yoga, as he becomes free of ego by the ordeal. Without transgressing right conduct of the good, the yogin may so move about that ordinary people may even disregard him, but they shall never associate with him. The yogin absorbed in meditation shall do no harm by word, thought, or physical action to beings such as the womb-born, the egg-born, and others. He shall avoid all associations. Abandoning all defects such as passion and anger, as well as pride, greed, delusion, etc., the mendicant monk shall remain free from fear. Eaten food given as alms, observing silence, penance, meditation specially, possessing correct knowledge and dispassion, these are considered to be the duties of a mendicant monk. Wearing an ochre garment, ever devoted to the yoga of meditation, he may take shelter for the night at the outskirts of a village, under the shade of a tree, or even at a temple. He shall always live on alms, and nowhere eat food obtained from one house alone. A wise man, before embracing renunciation, shall always be on the move till he obtains purity of mind. There the pure-minded shall renounce worldly life and move about here and there. Visualizing God, both outwardly and inwardly, he shall move about at all times, silent and free from impurity like the breeze. Equanimous in joy and sorrow, patient and forgiving, eating what comes to his hand, and seeing without enmity, equally on the twice-born, the cow, the horse, and the deer, etc., he shall journey. Meditating on Vishnu, who is the Supreme Self, and the Lord Ishana, contemplating on the supreme bliss, and remembering that he is Brahman alone, he shall spend his time. Thus, having become wise and possessing complete control over the mind, turning away from desires, unclad by becoming an Advuta, always disregarding all worldly affairs by thought, word, and deed, and turning his face away from the illusory phenomenal world, the sage becomes liberated from worldly bondage by deep meditation on his self, according to the maxim of the wasp and the worm. Thus ends the 5th chapter of this Upanishad. And I don't really know what to say. That's incredibly intense for any human being to undertake. Particularly in the West, I think it would be almost impossible. nearly impossible. You'd have to live out in the wilderness, but then you can't because you always have to be on the move. The other thing I see is a lot of monks out there who seem to live like this. They don't have anything, but yet they have all these followers and they profound wisdom and they do all these things that, according to this Upanishad, they're not supposed to do. So, I don't know. I don't know. There's a going on here that leads us to other things to discuss, like fraudulent gurus or not following the scriptures, or the scriptures have changed, or society's changed and thus we have to change the scriptures, or society's messed up and thus the scriptures are now lost time. We can no longer follow them, and that's why the world's so bad, because we can't follow God's words. I don't know. There's lots of avenues we could take, none of which I'm going to do right now because we would be here forever. And that's not the point of this video. The point is just to read these scriptures and wonder at them and ask questions and all that stuff. So I will allow you to ask questions down below if you want. Not that I have any answers, but you can just share, and maybe someone in this world watching this video will be able to respond with an answer better than me. And yeah, as we slowly make our way through this Upanishad. Thank you so much for joining me.